And good evening, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to episode 2 of MLB Trade Talk. John, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing well, Robbie. How are you on this Wednesday?
Oh man, another day of summer vacation. I can't complain. Like I was telling you before, just had to have a quick little meeting with my upcoming team for next school year, but we got done with that just in time for tonight's show. Seeing a lot of familiar faces in the chat, seeing some members, a couple moderators as well. Jacob Toon, Brendan DH, Odd Villain, couple of members here. Hello. Rays fan 39, Ethan, Timothy, what's going on? Mason, hello. Life and Sports Talk with Jake. How you doing, my friend? Joe Kagan, hello. Nicholas as well, another one of our moderators is here. Thank you for coming out. All righty, everyone, welcome. We're going to talk some trades. We are officially in July, and I think was last week's episode in June? Was that?
Yeah, today's July 6th, so it was the
All
end of
right,
June.
sweet.
Yeah.
Well, we're in July. This is the busy time now, officially. And John, how was your 4th of July? Did you have a good holiday?
Well, I did. Yeah, I got 3 boys, and so we lit some
Man.
fireworks out in the driveway. Some cool sparkler stuff.
Yeah.
It was all good.
Yeah, it was pouring here. So believe it or not, we did not have a whole lot of fireworks.
Oh,
I mean,
that's too bad.
people still got together in the downtown here, and there's still people out there even in the rain, and I still think they did the fireworks here. But yeah, good 4th of July. I ate too many hot dogs and hamburgers, and I'm still recovering from that. But here we are. We're here to talk some trades. So in this episode today, we're going to talk about some underrated trade candidates. If you didn't see last week's episode, we talked about who we think are the top trade candidates, and I'm sure we didn't get through all of them, but this one, we're going to talk about maybe more under the radar candidates as well. We're going to go over a couple of news before we do get to that. Just really quick, a couple of sponsors for today's show. We are partners with SeatGeek. Use my code HYDE, $20 off your first purchase. And if you're into the sports betting game, go check out Prize Picks. Use my code Ginger. They will give you a 100% deposit match. If you put in $20, they will give you $20. So go check it out if you can. But let's get to our first story here. We actually have some pretty big news. This could end up changing the landscape of the trade market. And we got some news on Frankie Montas and Tyler Mahle. Frankie Montas going to be missing a start, going to be getting a cortisone injection into his shoulder. His shoulder is not feeling too hot. And Mahle is actually on the IL. So really quick, John, I mean, what are your just instant reactions to that? Do you think this could really be a bombshell in the trade market? I don't know. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, no, I mean, like no one wants damaged goods in the trade market. So on our site, Baseball Trade Values, we basically reduced their numbers by about 20%. And that wasn't just a whim. That was based on the fact that they're going to miss, Mahle probably 3 starts. Montas missed 1. I mean, basically he was removed the first inning, so essentially missed 1. And then he's going to miss another 1. And then who knows about the third one? They're playing it day by day. But look, shoulder issues are no joke. They can often be indicators of more serious issues. I'm not a doctor or anything. I just know this from watching the market, that shoulders injuries tend to be, I mean, there's a spectrum, obviously, but they scare people away is the point. Right. And so, it means people who might have been interested in Montas and Mahle at the deadline are now thinking twice about that, because they're going to wait and see how healthy they are. And even if they are healthy, they're like, okay, what's to prevent it from happening again? If they just got a cortisone shot or just rest, like what caused it in the first place? And is it going to happen again? So why should I invest too much capital in that? So Absolutely. Their prices are going down, no question. And as an offset, I mean, we talked about Luis Castillo last week. We talked about Castillo, Montas, and Mahle as kind of the top 3, and that just means more people will want Castillo because, as we, for the moment anyway, he's the one that's healthy. And then there's another tier, but it changes the landscape quite a bit.
Absolutely, and the first thought that comes to my mind with the most recent was Mike Clevinger, a couple of years ago when he got traded to the Padres, big deal. And people were thinking, oh, man, Padres World Series in this Mickey Mouse season, but ended up getting hurt, really never even contributed for the Padres all that much. I think he maybe had a start or 2. And, that can just goes to show what can happen. I would think out of the two, it would seem just mathematically Montas has the better chance of keeping more of his value just because he could end up not missing as much time. With Mahle, he's going to be on the IL for it's 10 days, and that's at least a couple of starts that you're going to miss. Yeah. So, as you get closer, I mean, I guess maybe what could end up working in their favor is they did push the deadline back. It's only a few days, but maybe that could end up helping a little bit. I think it's really going to come down to, I think at least, how are they going to look in their next starts if they make their next starts? Like you said, shoulders, no joke. I've read somewhere, like you said, I'm not a doctor by any means, but I've read that teams would rather you have something wrong with your elbow than your shoulder, because at least Tommy John has had such a good success rate. Shoulders, on the other hand, that's not very fun. So.
And in Montas's case, he had thoracic outlet surgery, TOS, a couple of years ago. They had he had a rib removed. That's one of the procedures sometimes that they do. Wow. And so that makes things wonder, is this a recurring problem? And am I going to be stuck with this recurring problem? And so no question it reduces his value. Even, to your point, teams will watch his next, whenever he does start next, to see if his velocity is back up, because that can often be a key indicator. When the velocity is down, something is wrong. And so that was the case here. So in any case, we're talking about like bad timing. Poor A's fans, he was their last big trade chip, at least an obvious one anyway. Maybe they, think about Laureano Murphy, but they were hoping to move him, and now they're not going to get as much if they do.
Yeah. Do you think the A's made, and this is very hindsight here, do you think they made a mistake, maybe not just dealing him in the offseason?
Yeah. Well, look, they probably didn't get the value that they should have. And so, because they didn't with Manaea either. And so teams were lowballing them because they knew they were having a fire sale, and that's what happens. Everything must go 40% off, whatever. And so they were all lowballing him. Yeah. But they wanted to see if they get full value for him, and they just weren't. So they thought, okay, we'll hold on to him, see if the dynamics change, and know when to hold him, know when to fold him, right? They just got burned.
And they probably thought they got such a great package with Olsen that they could, maybe afford to wait a little bit.
Right.
Like, we just got a great haul of prospects here.
Yeah.
Even if Montas doesn't work out, that stings, but at least we got ourselves some really good prospects with Olsen. And then if it comes down to if Montas does get hurt, which is such bad timing, we're right there. And you got to be thinking they're just kicking themselves a little bit at least. So do you think, if you were to make a prediction, do you think Montas, let's say he ends up being fine, everything is good, do you think that they will end up trading him by the deadline, or do you think maybe they'll wait until the offseason?
Yes, because now kind of the cat's out of the bag, because even if they waited, say, until the offseason, at that point you've only got a year left. You've still got this sort of worrisome issue, like, well, what if his shoulder acts up again? So it's not going to change. That fact is already out in the open, right? So you might as well take advantage of the time element and say, okay, well, a year and a half of him is better than a year of him in terms of value, so trade him while you can.
Yeah. So, well, we do have one guy who is healthy, who is he's gone the opposite direction, where he was going through injuries and downtimes, but now he's looking a lot better than he was in the last couple of seasons, and that's Jose Quintana, showing or drawing plenty of interest out there. Jose Quintana, to me, and really the topic of the show tonight is under the radar. And Jose Quintana, to me, is one of the under the radar kind of guys. Obviously, Montas, Castillo, Mahle, those are the top names out there. But Quintana is one of those guys where, if you go on baseball trade values, he obviously has a far lesser value than those top guys. But which to me, he can end up being a hot commodity. So I'm not surprised he's drawing all this interest. What about you?
No, not at all. But reading between the lines, he's not going to cost much. He's a rental. He had a spotty track record the last couple of years. So, he's drawing interest because he's cheap, frankly, and the capital. It'll take a low to mid tier prospect to get him in teams like, oh, I can afford that, so I'm going to give him a call. That's why all these teams are calling about it.
Yeah, yeah. But looking at some teams really quick, I'm on Fangraphs. I'm on the splits leaderboard. If I were to share my screen really quick here, pulling up the splits leaderboards. If we're looking at left-handed pitching from the starting pitching for the teams, if we're looking at the rankings as of right now, the Giants lead the league in FIP with a 2.83. And in dead last, we're seeing teams like the Reds, the White Sox. We got the Blue Jays down here as well. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to add a left-hander, but it's possible. I'm seeing a team like St. Louis here who could possibly use some starting pitching. It's in division, but that could be an interesting rental for them. They did they did a couple of rentals last year with Lester and Happ, and based off of the farm system that they do have, Quintana could be someone that is affordable for them, and they've never really gone out there and made huge trades, especially at the deadline. Do you think the Cardinals could end up being a pretty decent fit for someone like Quintana?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they are in the same division as the Pirates, but we talked about that last week not being really a factor anymore as much as it used to be. But absolutely, they need pitching. I mean, Wainwright's 40 and, knows what he's got left in the tank. Miles Mikolas has a spotty injury history. He's up and down. Dakota Hudson's not having a great year. They need some help.
Yeah. Another team here are the Twins. I had in my predictions video. I take that back. Not predictions. I made a video. One trade each team should make by the deadline. Probably, most likely, none of them are going to work out. I will say last year when I did that video, I had one that came true. I had last year, I said the Braves should have made a trade for Richard Rodriguez, and that ended up happening.
Yeah.
So I did get one right, so hopefully I can get another one right this year. But in that video, I had the Twins going after Tyler Mahle, and maybe this could end up being another option for the Twins, where I thought he was a good fit because he's more of a fly ball guy. They have a good outfield defense, and maybe Quintana could be maybe a fit for the Twins. It feels like their starting pitching has been a little up and down with injuries. What do you think about the Twins?
They're one of the obvious teams that need starting pitching. Yeah. So, I mean, they're relying. I mean, when the season started, there was a real patchwork. They had to scramble to put a 5-man rotation together, and they're still scrambling, frankly.
Yeah.
And like I said, Quintana's not going to cost much. We have him at 2.9 surplus value. So, that's a lower-ish level prospect, which they can easily afford.
But one team that's really sticking out to me right here are the New York Mets. I wonder if the Mets could get in on the Quintana sweepstakes, an aggressive they're probably going to be a bit aggressive. Would you say the Mets could end up – now, I know it really obviously comes down to what can you give up in terms of prospects. I feel like the Mets, they have improved their farm system over the last couple of years. Do you think the Mets, not even just for Quintana, but do you think – they will end up being the most aggressive team at this trade deadline?
There was an interesting tidbit in a story I read the other day. It might have been Ken Rosenthal's latest piece. I'm not sure, but it was the industry executives were saying that the Mets would prefer to take on a bad contract to offset value instead of trading prospects, which makes total sense because Steve Cohen has all that money. He doesn't care about the money, but and they've said in the past that they would rather not trade their prospects unless they absolutely have to. So, reading between the lines again, you think, all right, well, they'll take on Moustakas to get Castillo. They'll take on, Hosmer. They almost took on Hosmer to get Paddock, and now they dodged a bullet there.
Yeah, they got lucky for once.
But that puts them more like, I don't think the Reds would just give up Castillo for salary relief of Moustakas. I think they want prospects. Yeah. But if you take that out of the equation, like who else could they be talking about, to take on a bad contract? Pittsburgh doesn't really have a bad contract off the top of my head. So that's just going to take a minor press, which they can still do if you're the Mets.
It's very interesting because that's not an advantage that you ever really think about when it comes to the trade market, but that's turned into an advantage for the Mets, just obviously because Cohen has pockets for days. Are there any other, while we're on this topic, before we shift gears, do you think there's any possible if we're here on baseball trade values, you can look, if you go to the at the top here, if you go to the highest lowest tab, you can take a look at every single player's value. And I'm at the bottom of the barrel right now. Steven Strasburg is the worst contract in Major League Baseball.
Mm.
But any of these names that kind of jump out at you, like right off the bat, do you see any? Or
I mean, Diamondbacks are trying to move Bumgarner, but nobody wants him. He's just meh. Like you're taking money, you're not getting much.
Yeah, I did post a trade. You know what? Let me actually pull it up while I'm here. Let's go take a look at this. Let's go, because I actually did make a trade for Bumgarner, or a Mets trade with Bumgarner. I think it got all the dislikes. Let's take a look here. Where was it? I've been making a lot of trades on here lately.
Yeah, I mean, while you're doing that, because he's not really a needle mover on the field anymore. He's not what he used to be, right? He's just more of a sort of a back-end innings guy. And if you're the Mets and the Braves are now pushing you pretty hard, you want a needle mover if you want to add to the rotation. You want to
right. Well, here's the trade I came up with the Mets, because that was the first guy that I thought of. I'm like, maybe the Mets would take Bumgarner. I don't know, because they do have a bit more of a spacious park out there. So maybe Bumgarner could be a bit of a good fit. So I threw in $50 million of cash. They just basically pay off the rest of his contract, and or the Diamondbacks send over that money. And then I just threw in a few prospects here, a few pitching prospects. So I don't know. I mean, Bumgarner is going to be really difficult to move.
Unless you sort of
all that bad.
You could also add Mantiply to the
that could be good too.
Or they could use a catcher like Carson Kelly, maybe added to the deal.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought I was sharing my screen. I'm sorry. Hold on, let me pull this up here. But this would be when you're looking at this was also a couple of weeks ago, so it's possible the values have.
Yeah, we did an update over this weekend, so the values have changed.
Okay. Well, so a couple weeks ago, but still with Bumgarner, you're still looking at probably paying a bit of money. And but that could be a really good idea as well. Mantiply, who we might be talking about here in a little bit, that could be a really nice piece. I mean, he won't, like you said, he won't be much of a needle mover, but could be a piece that you end up throwing in.
I mean,
I think Bumgarner is a guy to keep a lookout for. I don't know if he'll end up getting moved, but I think his name could scratch the surface a little bit. What do you think?
Well, front offices know what's going on, right? They're not like fans who are like, oh yeah, remember 2014 or whatever it was. That was a long time ago. And front offices know.
Feels like yesterday.
Yeah, I know. So front offices are not going to be fooled by that. What they'll look at is, can we work out a fair deal where Arizona kicks a lot of money or prospects or what have you? Arizona obviously not going to want to kick in prospects, so it's it's mostly about the money. But maybe he could be packaged with somebody like a Mantiply or a Peralta or something just to offset a little bit of value if they want to move those guys as well.
Absolutely. And we do have one more guy before we jump into some under the radar guys. We do have Andrew Benintendi, who about a week ago, 5 or 6 days ago, there was a report out there. The Blue Jays were showing some interest in Andrew Benintendi. I'm looking at the Blue Jays, and like the one thing I look at with the Blue Jays, it does seem like they could use a left-handed bat.
Mm-hmm.
If we pull up the Blue Jays here, you got a lot of R's here, a lot of R's. You do got Gavin Biggio. You do got guys like Zimmer, Tapia, Collins on the bench, but these guys aren't real, game changers when it comes to a lineup. Benintendi is a guy, higher average, good on base this year. He's going to get you a lot of base hits. He could be possibly a nice fit, but when I'm looking here, it just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of room for him. I mean, when you look at, you got left field. I mean, one thing with Benintendi is he lacks versatility. He could go play center field, but it's not going to be a good center field.
No.
Left field is definitely more of his spot. Or you got Gurriel Jr., but that is one guy who these numbers were actually a lot lower at one point, but they are starting to come up. His average is looking really good. On base is looking good. So I don't think they move him anywhere. Teoscar Hernandez has been one of their guys now. I don't see it. I don't know. Do you see Benintendi as a fit for the Blue Jays anywhere?
It's harder to fit him in the outfield, to be frank.
Yeah.
You'd have to end up doing some creative platooning. I will acknowledge that that's a right-handed heavy lineup, no question. So you want him for that balance, and maybe because you need a little bit more of a contact guy. But look, I run a value site, so I'll look at it from the value standpoint.
Right.
I don't know if right now he's a rental and his value's gone down a little bit in our model. We have him at 9.8, I think it is now. So you can maybe overpay to 10 or 11, but there's kind of a gap. We talked last week about the fit sort of issues sometimes. Like maybe you could put like two guys together, like an Otto Lopez or a Sem Roberzi, and you get that. But I'm not sure if the Royals want that. But the next tier is a little bit out of reach with Grosshands and Tiedemann and Elvis Martinez. Like that's a little too rich for a couple of months of Benintendi. So like it depends on the fit, what the Royals like from like the pieces in the mid to lower tiers there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think the Blue Jays, they're going to be a team out here. They're going to be kicking a lot of tires. I think their team feels like people have all of a sudden forgotten about the Blue Jays a little bit. They were the hype team coming into this year, and now they're kind of just there. So
they're technically still in the wild card race, but they've frankly been kind of quiet. They just lost 2 out of 3 to the A's actually.
Yeah.
So they've been kind of like meandering, slumping a little bit. Like they're not making any noise like you thought they might.
Right. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't see too much with that one. I don't think he ends up going there. I do think he ends up going somewhere though. But let's move into some underrated or under the radar trade candidates. John, I'll give you the first dibs. If you were to pick a guy who you think is really under the radar, who do you think is a guy?
Paul Blackburn.
Ooh, I like that. He's on my list too.
He came out of nowhere. Here's a guy who'd been DFA'd. He was way down on the depth chart of the A's. And, because they traded a couple other pitchers, like, okay, let's give Paul Blackburn some starts. And like, whoa, he totally turned a corner. And he had a great first half. Now, who knows if he can keep up that, but, his value has gone up from like 0 to about 7 in our model because, not only has he performed well with surface stats, but his advanced metrics were really good as well, which is what front offices look at. Absolutely. So I'm like, okay, what happened to Paul Blackburn here? I mean, somebody's going to be interested in him.
Absolutely. And if we were to pull up here, I'm on the baseballtradevalues.com. If we're looking at some value.
I'm seeing your Fangraphs page of Blackburn.
Yeah. I'm just gonna switch that over. Here we go. Blackburn. Okay, let me move over to the other screen. All right. So if we're looking at Blackburn, we're looking at around 7.1 million as of right now. Mm-hmm. Do you think his value could end up? I mean, when we're talking trade deadline, you can always see, especially and you could end up seeing Blackburn's market emerge here. And it just so happens the guy who's one of the top guys, he's on the trade market. Blackburn is his teammate, so you don't have to go very far to look for another starting pitcher on the Oakland A's. His market could really develop. Could you see Blackburn's value like really shooting up, mainly just because of the market?
Not that much.
Not that much.
I mean, because like, okay, he's definitely having a good year, but like the track record wasn't there before. So like, if you're really going to overpay, you want a sense of confidence that, he's not going to turn into a pumpkin,
Yeah. And he's a guy, gets a good amount of ground balls. I had him as a good fit for the Cardinals. Good infield defense. They could use a guy. He kind of fits that mold, I think. Where he's not going to cost all that much. Yeah. And that's the one thing with the Cardinals. When you look at their history, they've never really made like a big splash at the deadline, at least one that I can't think of. They've made little moves here and there. I'm trying to think of when, 2011 and then 2006. I don't recall any big moves that they made.
Not so much at the deadline, obviously in the offseason, Arenado.
They make more offseason, like the Paul Goldschmidt one.
Yeah.
But I can't think of any big trade deadline deals. But
No,
this
you're
could
right.
be, to me, it seems like it fits their mold a little bit. Him or Jose Quintana. So
Yeah,
I
no,
think Paul
and
Blackburn is an interesting one. So
yeah, and it kind of fits what you were saying earlier with they had Hap and Lester last year. That's kind of their style at the deadline.
yeah, but the good thing about him is he's under control. He's not a free agent until 2026. So
Right. Now, the
that's
bad thing
something.
is he's out of options. So if he
Right.
does go south, you're kind of stuck, so
Yeah.
teams will notice
Yeah.
that.
If you DFA him, he's not making. Well, you can. I forget how the rule. Yeah, you can DFA him, right? Even if he's in arbitration. Is that
Yeah,
how it
sure,
works?
of course. But
Yeah.
then you're subject to any team claiming him, or
Right.
unless you trade him for
Yeah.
peanuts. Because usually when you DFA somebody, the clock starts ticking and you have to get rid of them. So basically, it cuts
Yeah.
your trade value in half if you've got any left at all.
Right. Well, yeah, Paul Blackburn, I definitely think is a guy to be on the lookout for. And we mentioned this one earlier. Joe Mantiply. This was a guy in my video that I posted on a few nights ago with one trade for each team. We were talking about the Blue Jays. I think the Blue Jays, they really could use another reliever at the back end of that bullpen, more of a setup kind of a guy. I think someone like a Joe Mantiply could be huge for them. I think the Mets, like you mentioned, with Bumgarner, the Mets actually really could use a left-handed reliever. They haven't really had a lefty, with Aaron Loop going to the Angels. I think they really miss him. I think that was a big loss for them. But they've really lacked a lefty reliever, and they also just let I'm going blank on his name. They just DFA'd him. Shreen. Is that his
Jason
last name?
Shreve, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So he was a lefty there, and he hasn't really worked out.
Yeah.
So a Mantiply for the Mets could end up being really good. What are you thinking here with Mantiply?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, he's kind of a late bloomer. He kind of came out of nowhere last year, and he's steadily improved. Isn't Brett Strom the pitching coach now in Arizona?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, he retired from Houston, but then he lives in Arizona. He's like, okay, I'll work with the Diamondbacks, and they were like, okay, come. And then he's starting to work some magic with guys you never heard of, like Mantiply. Okay,
Yeah.
and because that's what he does. But yeah, he's got 4.5 years of control. So you wonder if he would even be on the market for Arizona, because they might think, okay, we could use
Absolutely.
him in years.
Yeah, ton of control.
Yeah,
and with the Diamondbacks, their team, coming into this year, people were really just saying, nah, Diamondbacks aren't doing anything. But they really came into this year with all intentions of trying to compete. And they are actually not too far out of the race. I feel like, hold on, let me just double check here. They have not been playing all that great. They're only 8 out. I mean, I know I say only, but they're not completely out of it. One good run, they could possibly get back into it. So
yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
They've got a great farm system, so on paper you'd think their competitive years are more ahead of them than they are right now.
Yeah, right.
They got Corbin Carroll coming, and they got some pitchers coming, and so I think their future is bright, but I'm not sure this is their year.
Yeah, like if you were running the Diamondbacks, would Mantiply be someone, even with the control, more of a journeyman kind of a guy? Would this be a guy you would like to hang on to, or would you feel like, with $3.8 million of value, would you maybe want to try and sell high on him now while you can?
Yeah, I think it depends on the offer. Because they've got a strong farm, like I said, so it's not like you need to move him. So maybe if somebody offered an overpay, and because relievers, and especially you got Brett Strom in your back pocket here who can work with them and develop them. You might think, and Billy Beane used to do this all the time. He would develop a closer and then sell high on that closer, get prospects back, and then just keep next guy up, sell high on the next, And so some teams think that way, and so this could be one of those situations.
Absolutely. Well, there is another guy out here. Let's shift gears. Let's get away from the pitching. One guy that I think is really under the radar. We're talking about Andrew Benintendi earlier. Now, I just wonder if he ends up getting moved. I just don't know if they're going to do it. But that's Whit Merrifield. Not a great year this year. I will say he's starting to pick it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Starting to pick it up. I know the average still looks a little low, but this average was way lower than this at one point. He is still a guy who offers versatility. As you can see, 45 games at second base, 33 in right field. He's played center as well. So this is a guy, to me, he still offers a pretty decent amount of value. He's also under control for next year. There's a mutual option for 2024. He's not making a whole ton of money, 4.6 AAV. Everyone's talking about Andrew Benintendi and even guys like Scott Barlow on the Royals. What are you thinking here with Whit Merrifield?
So, guys like him generally, don't attract a whole lot of interest in the market. Adam Frazier didn't return all that much at the time. The two times he was traded, and he was like a second baseman primarily / left fielder, somewhat similar profile to Merrifield in that, he hit for average, but not so much for power. Merrifield is a little bit older. He was a bit of a late bloomer. And so now you kind of think, oh, all right, he's probably in decline. The good news is his contract is weird. He's making $7.5 million this year, but only $2.75 million next year. So he actually gets cheaper, which kind of offsets that sense of decline. So he has a little bit of value, but teams are not going to give up a whole lot for him. I think we have him in the 5s. I'm just checking. Yeah, we have 6.0. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird. He's making $7 million this year, then down to 2.75, and then 18 million a mutual option. That's very very out there. I wonder what it's like. What did he think that he was? I don't know. Hey, it's a good motivator, I guess. 18 million. But yeah, I think Merrifield, he's just always really interesting. I thought he was going to get moved last year. I really did. I thought he could have been a good fit for the Yankees. I saw someone in the chat. This is actually really interesting because Chris Taylor is now on the IL with a fractured foot, who is their utility guy. Who knows how long he is going to be out, especially with, when you have a fracture in your foot, that can end up taking a long time to get back from. Not really a timetable. But he said here, not what I was hoping. Obviously, definitely a surprise to me, but it showed a small fracture there, and it's going to be a little longer than initially expected. In his place, the Dodgers activated Zach McKinstry from the injured list, so they do have him. But could Merrifield possibly be an option for the Dodgers? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting call. I can kind of see it, because he's only got 1.5 years of control for getting that mutual option, because that's crazy. And he kind of fits their mold. The Dodgers like to kind of plug in these veteran guys. They had signed A.J. Pollock a while back, and he was productive for them for a while. So they don't mind these sort of veteran guys to plug holes. They had Chase Utley for a while there. He sort of fits that mold, right? And maybe it wakes him up if he's on a contender. So I can see it.
Absolutely. And speaking of guys, it's actually funny. We had one of our longtime subscribers, William Fulgham, in the chat. And he says here in the chat, let me actually pull this up here, because this is a guy who I think is extremely underrated. And that is Brandon Drury. William Fulgham saying Drury would be better. He is having himself a really good year, kind of an out of nowhere sort of a year. Is definitely his best season to date. But man, and Castillo is the guy that everyone's talking about with the Reds, Mahle as well, but who knows what's going to happen with him. But Drury is a guy I think is extremely under the radar, but not just because he's having a good offensive season, but we're talking about with Merrifield, he has that versatility where he can move around. He's not going to be a game changer at any position, really, but the fact that he's a body and he can move and play those positions at least somewhat respectively, I think has value to it. What are you thinking about Brandon Drury?
So, yeah, his value has gone from basically nothing to, we have him at 4.9 right now. So he's going to attract some interest because most teams can afford that. He's a rental because he was basically just signed to a 1-year show-me contract. And, so that's going to get the Reds a mid-tier prospect. They are absolutely shopping him because they're not contenders, and he's on expiring contract. So there's no question he's going to get moved. I will say, if you go back into his history, he was once very highly regarded, but then he had some, I think, eye issues which took a while to fix, and his vision was not quite there.
Sounds like it would make, yeah.
So that maybe it's fixed, and now the promise that he had a few years ago is finally coming to fruition. So in baseball industries, they know this, and they're, he's finally, Brandon Drury finally put it together, So it's not like a surprise for people who've been following it for a few years. So there'll definitely be some interest.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're looking at him here, 46 games at third, 20 at second. He's even played first, even a few games at first, two at short. So the fact that he can play those positions, that's what teams are really liking these days. When Chaim Bloom came in, that's one thing that Bloom really started to look for the Red Sox. He felt like, if you go back to that 2019 season, they lacked a lot of depth that year. They were coming off of a World Series. Didn't have a horrible season by any means, but obviously it wasn't great. But when you looked at that team that year, they really just had a guy for each spot, for each position. They didn't really have a guy that could really move around all that much. But now, when you look at the Red Sox, they got multiple guys that can play multiple positions. So,
yeah,
I think obviously that's starting to get onto that bandwagon. And Drury is a guy, to me. He checks those boxes.
Absolutely, and the Dodgers have been doing that for years. They've been moving guys all over the place. It's kind of a thing they do. I mean, they're not going to want like a stationary corner first base type. They're going to want a guy like a Drury who can play. They can move around because he'd be replacing Taylor in a sense. So they've been moving around Lux. They've been moving around all sorts of guys. So even Bellinger went from first to center. Lux been moving around second to left, whatever. So Betts even plays second base sometimes. Who knows? But they like to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially now with who knows how long Chris Taylor is going to be out for. And Drury, when you're looking at the values, is cheaper than Merrifield, obviously because he is a rental, really, while Merrifield has another year of control. But even though he's a rental, he's really not going to cost you anything. So right now, I think he's owed probably around like $450,000 left for the rest of the season. So that's he's going to be a hot commodity. I could definitely see the Dodgers. If the Angels still feel like they can compete, if we're looking at the Angels, they're not doing great. Lost 3 in a row as of right now, 7 out in the wild card. I picked them as a team that could end up going for a Brandon Drury because that's the thing with the Angels is I don't know if they're going to sell. I don't know. I could see them doing that, like buying, because it's just like,
even their beat reporters don't know. When I think it was the Athletics, like, who's buying, who's selling, and their beat was like, I don't know.
Well, because I just don't think Moreno is going to fold. I think he's going to say, no, we're going to compete. We got the guys. We went out this offseason. We added guys. We're going to compete. I am looking out for them in the second half. I do think they're a team that can get hot, but that's why I think they could make a move like that because their infield has been horrible this year. When you look at their infield offensive numbers, they're not really getting anything out of their infield all that much. So I think Drury's an exciting one. And another guy who is also on the Cincinnati Reds is Kyle Farmer. Kyle Farmer is a guy I feel like you're not hearing about at all, and I feel like you might not even hear his name until deadline day. What are your thoughts on Kyle Farmer?
Kyle Farmer was basically, he was basically a throw-in on a Reds-Dodgers deal a few years ago, and he was a catcher at the time, But then they plugged him in at shortstop, which made no sense when they first tried it. But it turns out he's such a good athlete. Yeah, sure, I'll cover shortstop, and he did. And then he started, he didn't have much of a reputation as a hitter, but then he started to hit a little bit. And okay, like the more playing time they gave him, the more he seemed to thrive. Mm-hmm. And so, he's been kind of a funny sort of good story on his own right. He's just like one of these hardworking lunch pail guys that just does his job and is fine. He's not a world beater by any means, but he gets the job done wherever they put him.
Yeah.
He's an average player, which the more he plays shortstop carries value, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I think ultimately they could just end up hanging on to him just because of the control. I feel like with the Reds, they probably think they could maybe contend in the next couple of years. I feel like they give off that vibe a little bit. Like if you look at this past offseason, yeah, sure, they made some trades, but they brought some guys back to, try and put at least some kind of a team on the field. They didn't just completely throw it in, but I think Farmer could be a guy they end up hanging on to just because he has that control. But I think because he plays shortstop, the Angels, like I said, they could use some offense. Velasquez hasn't really done too much with the bat, really good glove, but I could see Farmer maybe being a guy for them.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, the Angels have a terrible farm, one of the worst in business, but they can at least afford a guy in the single digits. The question is, will they?
Absolutely.
2.5 years of Farmer, who's sort of an average player but can kind of do the job. Is that worth matching it up a Kyron Paris or a Jordan Adams in there? Yeah, maybe, because those guys maybe just bust, and then they've got 2.5 years of productive Kyle Farmer instead. So, you got to look at it from a number of different angles. So I could see it.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But they also have another teammate that could be of interest to some other teams. We've been hearing his name a little bit, and that is Mr. Tommy Pham. I mean, a lot of what we've been hearing about with him is the whole fantasy football, the slap heard around the world with Jock Peterson. That was fun. But with the bat, he's actually started to get back to, these are the kind of numbers I saw Tommy Pham putting up a couple of years ago. I think he absolutely could be a pretty nice option for a team, especially teams, who have some injuries. You're looking at, one team that really sticks out, the Phillies. They could maybe use some outfield help. Tommy Pham, what are you thinking here with him value-wise?
4.2. So he's a rental, and yes, his bat is good. His bat has always been good, frankly.
Yeah.
But the knock on him is he's kind of a bad attitude guy. There's a reason why he's bounced around from team to team to team. He's in the Cardinals and the Rays and the Padres and then, Reds. And he's always signed for a little bit less than his paper value would suggest. And that's why, because he's not the greatest clubhouse influence. So, but if you can live with him for a couple of months, which is all you're getting here, and you're going to get a bat, and a right-handed bat at that, if you're looking for a right-handed bat, then pull the trigger. It's not going to cost much.
Absolutely. I've kind of always gotten that vibe with him, and but with the numbers, it is looking pretty good. It's funny because he had some good expected numbers last year. The surface numbers didn't look great, but the expected numbers looked good. He just had a lot of bad luck last year. And I remember he had an expected on base in the 350s, and that's kind of right around where it was projected. So the projections really helped him out, and he had good projections coming into this year. So as you can see, he's pretty much on pace, with the projections as of right now. So I think Pham absolutely could be of interest to some teams. What are some teams that you think could be pretty good for Tommy Pham?
Well, because of that sort of attitude issue, you need a guy, like a Bob Melvin or a Buck Showalter who a Dusty Baker, like an old school, like hard-nosed manager who could say, no, I'm not putting up with your BS,
Yeah.
So, that's the first place I look. Not one of these young analytics guys, but more of an old school Buck guy. We'll put him in his place, So, I don't know if he's a fit on the Mets necessarily, but JD Davis has been disappointing a little bit, so they could probably use another bat. That's the first thought that comes to mind.
Yeah, I like that. You said the Astros. I wonder. Yeah, it's interesting because you have Chas McCormick here in left. I feel like he's been picking it up a little bit lately. Overall numbers aren't too great. I mean, he was on their team last year in the World Series, but I wonder if Pham could end up being an option here. I agree with that one. That could be a pretty nice piece. And with Pham,
the only thing there is he's not really a center fielder because he was in his younger days, but he's more of a left field guy now. Yeah. He's lost a step. And that's where their hole is because they've got Brantley. Well, Brantley can DH too. They got Alvarez. They've been playing Alvarez in left field for crying out loud.
Right.
But they've got Brantley. They got Kyle Tucker in right. Their hole has been in center. So I suppose they could make it work, but it's not the most perfect fit.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Mets, like you said, it's really the only thing they got open as of right now would be more of just the DH spot.
Yeah.
You could move McNeil back to second, and then Gourmet can go back to the bench. But Gourmet's having himself a pretty nice year. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what kind of a market develops for Tommy Pham. But let's move on here to this is, since we're talking about the Mets, this is a team that I think could go after this guy. His name is starting to surface out there, and that's Andrew Chafin. And I did not think this would be a guy that could be in any trade rumors because I thought the Tigers were going to be competing. Overall, I do think Andrew Chafin ends up staying because I think obviously they signed him to a multi-year deal, but he also can opt out. So I don't know if so teams would really just be probably looking at him as a rental. Do you think Chafin could emerge as a trade candidate, or do you feel like he ends up staying with the Tigers?
Oh, absolutely. Teams will be calling on that on him because lefties in particular at the deadline are always in demand. We have him at 4.3. We're assuming he doesn't opt out because he's getting older and he's got a nice contract for his age. So he'd want that money. But he'd also want to, if he were traded, go to a contender. So I could see it. I mean, we were talking earlier about the Mets, and they don't really have they just DFA'd Chasen Shreve, who didn't work out. I could definitely see them wanting a left-handed arm there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're saying here, we were talking about the Mets, about how because they have pockets for days, they could end up being a team that possibly takes on a bad contract. When I'm thinking of with the Tigers, do they have a bad contract?
Well, Miguel Cabrera's not moving, but that's the bad contract.
Funny enough, you got Javier Baez. Could they?
No, they're moving. Yeah, they overpaid for Javier Baez. I mean, one thing. Tucker Barnhart might be an interesting sort of under the radar fit there if the Tigers throw in the towel, because the Mets catching situation could use a veteran there, and he costs a little money in salary, so maybe there's a package deal there.
Yeah, absolutely. That could be something. I think Barnhart's a guy. Be on the lookout for him. Also, kind of unrelated here. Did you hear about the Eduardo Rodriguez story today?
Yeah.
My goodness. Like, what the? I mean, obviously, I've been watching Erod now for what feels like years. My goodness, just hasn't even returned any phone calls. That's pretty scary.
No. It was reported that he was dealing with a marital issue, but the fact that he hasn't been in communication with the team, he's on, he's not getting paid for this particular leave. I guess the rules are, because it's his volition or whatever. But and then the rumors are, could the Tigers void that contract if it goes south any further? And they probably could, because he's probably in breach. And I'm not a lawyer, but I'm guessing that could very much turn that way.
Yeah. So, well, no team is going to be trading for Eduardo Rodriguez anytime soon, but I do think Chafin is really interesting. Since we're on the topic of relievers, how about my subscribers and my viewers? There's a running joke with Alex Colomé. Alex Colomé and I have quite the relationship, because I remember in the off season, people in the chat, they were like, "Oh my God, breaking news! Jeff Passan, go look at what Jeff Passan wrote." And I'm thinking, "Oh my God, we got a big move." And it was just Alex Colomé. And I was like freaking out, like thinking, "Oh my God," it's like huge. Because usually people in the chat, during that time, they were very helpful about letting me know, if a deal went down. I'm thinking, come on, Alex Colomé, seriously? I had a bit of a temper tantrum over that one. But watch, my Red Sox will probably end up trading for him, and that's going to be great. But the reason I was at the time with Alex Colomé, I'm thinking, Alex Colomé, really? This is big news, because he wasn't even that great in the prior season, but he's doing pretty good here with the Colorado Rockies. And I will say, I actually called this because if you look at the science, cutters tend to be very good at Coors Field, and he's having success there this year. He's having himself a really good season. You got to think Colomé is going to be an option, or do you think maybe teams are skeptical, thinking, okay, he's probably just having success? Because if you look at his expected ERA 4.96 and his
Yeah.
expected FIP 4.19. Do
Yeah.
you think teams would be scared off by those expected numbers with him?
Absolutely.
Or do you
And
think
we use those expected numbers in our model because we know that's what the teams are looking at, because they focus more on process than outcome, and those are numbers that say, okay, here's how he's doing process wise. It's not good. That's why we have him at negative 1.5. Yeah, I don't think, he had his peak a few years ago, and I don't think he's the same pitcher anymore. But you make a good point about what's, on the surface anyway, working for him in Colorado. It just seems like Colorado's a weird place to pitch because balls move differently at altitude.
right?
Yeah. And so we're trusting that those expected stats are on point, and that teams, the Rockies are probably not going to want to kick in cash because it's not that big. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see much value there at all.
Now, could you maybe pair Colome with another guy on the Rockies? Is there anyone on the Rockies that possibly, if we're looking at one other guy here, this is another guy I have on my list. Well, actually, he's a negative value too. So I don't know. Colome and Cole
with Daniel Bard is a positive value guy. Yeah. But that's two relievers in one deal, which is a little bit unusual, but not unheard of.
Could you see a situation where maybe you pair Bard and Cole together?
Yeah. I mean, Cole's another sort of back-end starter that, the problem with back-end starter types like that is that everybody has them already as depth guys. And so there's not much market demand.
And they tend to go to the minors too.
Yeah. So there's really no value there. Grishik, maybe CJ Cron, if they wanted to trade him, you could package him with one of those guys.
Yeah. I mean, Cron could end up being a fit for the Mets.
Yeah, and we talked about that last week a little bit, but he's a right-handed bat, and maybe I'm changing my tune on that. Maybe they could use another right-handed bat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Bard. We talked a little bit about Bard last week, but I think could you? I don't know. I feel like the Rockies will hang on to CJ Cron in the end, but you never know.
Yeah, I love him.
Yeah, I mean they brought him back. I think he ends up staying ultimately.
Yeah.
But I routed off quite a few names there. What are some other names that you have?
We were talking about the Tigers, but we didn't talk about Michael Fulmer, and he's in his final contract year. He's really good, and he's going to be an end reliever. I think he's going to go before Chafin does. I mean, obviously they should have traded Fulmer years ago, and this is the problem with Olavila. He hangs on his guys, the GM of the Tigers. He tends to hang on to his guys too long, and he should have traded Matthew Boyd when he had value, waited too long on him. Then he got nothing, and he should have traded Fulmer back when his value was sky high, and he waited too long. So now it's his last chance to squeeze any value out of Fulmer. We have him at 3.1, but his numbers are good. I think he'll be in demand.
Yeah. There is the FIP is a full run higher than the ERA, but it's still not really that high. Gets a decent amount of strikeouts, 9. It's not anything too crazy, but pretty solid. Could probably get those walks down a little bit, but overall, he's been a serviceable guy. I could see him going somewhere, possibly being a setup guy or just a really strong option in middle relief. I think Fulmer is definitely a guy to look out for. Any other names you have on your list?
Did we talk about David Peralta last week?
Ooh, we did not. That was a name I thought about, and I forgot to put him on my list. So perfect. I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah, we have him at 0.9. Obviously not a lot of value because he's getting paid. He's got a contract, and, he's not that great or anything, but he's a good left-handed bat, solid fielder. He's a left fielder. Another one of these guys that can't really play center, but if a team, like we talked about the Blue Jays earlier, that could use a decent left-handed bat, and it's not going to cost them much in capital, then he's definitely getting moved because he's not a bad team, and it's his final contract year.
Absolutely. Yeah, David Peralta's always been that guy where you hear him possibly come up as an option for another team. And I wonder. That the one thing with him, he's always had problems staying on the field. But last year, he actually did a great job. He played 150 games. the numbers weren't all that great. It looks like his power is just completely dissipated. 2018, he had 30 homers, 87 RBIs. That was down to 8 last year. So, the slugging is up this year along with the home runs. So he's figured something out. So I think he could end up being a pretty decent option. He's playing pretty decent defense out there in left field. But do you think teams would be more likely to want to go after Benintendi, or do you think teams could lean more towards Peralta because with Peralta, he's going to be a lot cheaper? What do you think?
Yeah, he's a lot cheaper, and that matters. Benintendi, you can count on to move the needle a little bit more than with Peralta. So he's your sort of A-list choice, and you're going to negotiate it and see if you can get him cheaper than the market, but you're not. And so if you lose out on him, okay, who's next? Then you go down to Peralta. The Yankees are looking for another outfielder. I could see them doing that.
Good clubhouse guy too, and I could see.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah, I could see the Yankees wanting something like that. So, but since we're on the topic of the Diamondbacks, there is another guy on the Diamondbacks, and I do wonder if he ends up being on the market. I'm not quite sure, but my computer is freezing. Hold on a second. What is going on here? Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay. I thought maybe Mike Hulk. Okay, well, I cannot pull up the Diamondbacks, so I'm going to have to just pull up his page. Christian Walker. This guy's having quite the power this year, hitting a lot of home runs, 21 home runs on the year. He's under control until 2025. I remember at the beginning of the year, I remember going back to the offseason, I'm thinking, man, Christian Walker, this guy, terrible season last year. He was hurt also last year. 10 home runs, 46 RBIs. I was screaming from the mountaintops. The Diamondbacks got to upgrade here at first base. They got to do something. I was even thinking, maybe, go after, maybe not for first base, but go after someone like Luke Voit. But Walker has really proved me wrong with the power, at least. He's not hitting really at all for average. The on base is pretty low, but if you're looking for some power and some slugging, WRC plus is okay. Do you think Walker could end up being a guy, or what do you think?
I mean, he's obviously having a resurgent year. We have him at 3.7, and if that seems low, that's because A, he has a very spotty track record. B, he's not really a complete hitter. He's just sort of a corner first baseman, stationary type who hits home runs. Now, granted, he's having a great year, but it's a somewhat limited profile. Right. And the market for that, like Josh Bell will go before him, in terms of interest and also availability, because and the other thing with Walker is he's out of options. So if he goes south, he's a DFA. So that's going to keep a lid on his value as well.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought up Josh Bell. Now, we were talking before this. I don't know if you really consider Josh Bell like an under the radar kind of a guy, but I had some comments from last week's stream saying, hey, you guys didn't talk about Josh Bell really. He's a great candidate out there. And I guess we really missed out on that. I don't know. I think we mentioned him and I probably thought in my head, oh, okay, we talked about him. But no, let's dive into Josh Bell. I think there's a lot of teams. He's going to have definitely more of a market than someone like Christian Walker. Josh Bell, do you think there could end up being a lot of teams that end up getting in the mix, especially with the DH, or do you feel like his market ends up being pretty limited?
I'd say somewhere in between, because you're getting a hot bat. You're getting a bat that, okay, he's done it enough now where you think, okay, he has hot and cold streaks, but you put him on a winning team with a good manager knows you to use him, and he's going to definitely make a difference. And he's a rental, and he's not going to cost you that much. We have him at 5.6. So he'll cost like a mid-tier pitching prospect or maybe a couple low-level prospects. That's affordable for most teams. And, when he's on, he is a difference maker. So teams will be interested in that. Now, I don't know how many.
He's been out of his mind.
Yeah. Now, they may not play him at first base. They may just play him at DH because he's not a very good first baseman anyway. Right. But he's a bat. Come on. He's just a one-dimensional, he's a defensively challenged bat. So you use him as a DH or whatever, and you're fine.
Yeah. It's funny with Bell and his defense, because I've always thought the same thing. When you look at him compared to other first basemen in the league right now, if we go take a look at Fangraphs at the leaderboards, he's actually not terrible compared to, I mean, first base is also, and that's another thing too. And I think a lot of viewers who have, if they have maybe some, because I've seen people comment this about certain first basemen, like, oh, how is his value not any higher? Like, I remember with Matt Olson, people are thinking, how is his value not any high? It was like 40, 45 million in that range. People are thinking, huh? That's it? Well, could you get into why first basemen tend to not have as higher of a value?
Yeah, because it's a supply and demand problem at the end of the day. There's so many guys who can play first base. You can stick a DJ LeMahieu at first base. You can stick a Keston Hiura at first base. There's this it's the easiest position on the field to play. So the defensive value is really not there, and the market is colder because there's always too much supply and not enough demand. And so we saw, for example, Carlos Santana get moved, and they had to kick in a bunch of cash just to move him. And that's pretty typical of first baseman types, especially if that's the only position you can play on the field, obviously excepting DH. There's just not much of a market historically for that position. But people will be interested in the bat. Absolutely.
And also, because I know you use a lot of, like Fangraphs as well, numbers like that. Is it also just because first basemen tend not to, because if you look at Fangraphs here at the positional adjustment, they have, like, if you look at a position like, catcher, that's a plus 12.5, where shortstop plus 7.5, center field 2.5, important positions, second base as well. With first base, it tends to be a position, like you said, a lot of other guys can end up playing it. So is that also a reason, simply just because why first basemen tend not to have that high value?
Yeah. I mean, you could, like I said, you can put, just about anybody at first base and they can do it.
Yeah. And when you look at the value, like, obviously shortstop is going to be more of a position that you want to make sure is a shored up position. First base, you can kind of get by with some of these guys. Because when you're looking at the leaderboards, Christian Walker right now is the top defensive first baseman. I mean, look, 11 defensive runs saved. He gets it done with the glove. And then, someone like Ryan Mountcastle, who only has 1 defensive run saved, he comes in next. So it's like they're not really. I don't want to say this insultingly, but they're not really important when it comes to the defense, if that makes any, or not as important as other positions. So where, Freddie Freeman, as you can see here, he's not really doing too much defensively this year. The UZR is in the negatives. He's at 0 defensive run save, but everyone knows how good Freddie Freeman is with the bat. So, Josh Bell, I remember one of the featured trades on there was the Red Sox on Baseball Trade Values. There's always the featured trades. And that one got quite a bit of attention. That one, I thought it was really interesting, the trade that was put on there. I believe it was just Josh Bell for Jay Groome, just straight up. Is there. He's the Red Sox number 9 prospect, or number 11, somewhere in that range right now, where that just shows how much it would cost. Let me actually pull this up here, because I wonder if because I think Josh Bell at the time, it was like a 3.5 million or like 4 or something like that. But the values have adjusted. And I need to have a quick little celebration. I just saw the name Robles. Oh my, thank God. I feel bad because, I do think there is something going on. I don't know if there was like an injury or something, but because he did look pretty good, at last year down the stretch. So, but I was saying for a while now, he needed to go. But anyway, as you can see here, this was one of the featured trades not too long ago, where it was this Bell for Jay Groome straight up. But as you can see now, Bell, who has just been on fire, if you look at his numbers in the last 15 games, he's hitting almost 400, 468 on base, 604 slugging. You're out of your mind, Josh Bell. And so that has definitely helped his value a little bit. So the Red Sox now would have to pony up a little bit more if they wanted to get him. I think as a Red Sox fan, I was thinking for a little there, Dahlback, Frankie Cordero, you could probably get by with that platoon. But I'm wondering if Bloom is going to want to maybe get shored up, and especially have a bat like Bell, who could just improve your offense that much more. What do you think about the Red Sox possibly going after someone like Josh Bell? You know, they had that relationship last year with Kyle Schwarber making that trade. Do you think this could be realistic?
I do. I like it. I mean, keep in mind he's a rental, so you'd only have him for 2 months plus whatever you get in the playoffs. So, it's not going to hurt the development of a Dahlbeck or Tristan Casas or whoever. He's just sitting there for 2 or 3 months. So, and you can always you have JD Martinez, but you can play him at first and you can get by for 2 months. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And one guy who I think could be interesting that you or a couple of guys, you could pair them. Where, earlier we were talking about how you don't usually see a couple of pitchers get put together in a package. But I wonder if you could possibly put one of these relievers, someone like Kyle Finnegan, who's doing pretty good. You have Edwards Jr. You could possibly put him in a deal. And, I mean, he's got no value, so he's not really making any difference here. But, could you see the Nationals maybe doing a package for Bell just because his value is so low? Or lower?
Yeah, I mean, if you can find somebody to package him with, the Nationals just don't have a whole lot to trade outside of them.
Yeah, I could honestly see the Red Sox. I think they'll look at other options out there, but knowing Bloom, I could see Bloom because David Robertson is obviously going to have himself quite the market. I think Daniel Bard's market is going to heat up. So I could see Bloom absolutely, because he's done it before where he just pulls out. Like, he doesn't want to even get into any kind of a bidding war. That's just not Bloom's style. Bloom's like, all right, I'll let those guys go focus on, David Robertson and Daniel Bard. I'll go over here where no one else is looking, and I'll go, see if I can find a guy like Finnegan who's having a pretty decent year. I could see Bloom doing something like this. I think there's a few teams out there for Josh Bell. In my video, I had Josh Bell going to the Giants. I think that could end up being a nice fit for them. They've been having struggles offensively. I think a bat like that could really help. Any teams off the top of your head that could be a fun fit for Josh Bell?
I'm struggling to think of fits off the top of my head that, because
I remember the Blue Jays for the longest time were like,
well, because we're going, but you got Vladdy at first.
Right.
You got a bunch of bats in the outfield. So the main thing is he's a left-handed hitter, and then as we said earlier, they need a left-handed bat. So maybe, Padres maybe because they're done with Hosmer.
Yeah. Well, if we go back to June 1st to now, so about a month, if we look at the offensive rankings on Fangraphs, I don't know, the Angels. Could you maybe do the Angels?
Yeah.
Maybe find a spot for him. I don't know. But
I mean, if you just look at, Hosmer, by the way, he started off really hot, but he's cooled off quite a bit. And he's kind of regressed back down to his mean.
Yeah. And the Padres are kind of middle of the road when it comes to the offense. So maybe that could be, they've been having injuries, and then Tatis Jr. will come back. Machado just came back. That could be an interesting fit. Seattle's offense, could you possibly do something like that? Where eventually you'll get Haniger back for right field. They will get Kyle Lewis back. I don't know what's going on with Kyle Lewis. It's like,
knee troubles that are persistent. Yeah,
he's just not reliable. Like, it's not someone that I would, to me, a player's value, a lot of it is how available are you?
Right.
I mean,
keep in mind Ty France, great hitter. He's their first baseman, but he's hurt right now. Yeah. So, maybe a guy like Bell can sort of spell him for a while until he comes back and then be a DH after.
Yeah, and the Mariners, they're playing some pretty good baseball lately. And as you can see here, 5 out, they're almost back to 500. And I've been saying this about the Mariners. This was a team, I went with the hot hand, and I went with the Mariners to make it all the way to the championship series in the American League. Maybe that is somewhat getting a little... Possibly, maybe. No, probably not. But
they were hot last year in the second half, and
they were.
Maybe they're getting there again this year.
Yeah, and I think I could see them now. The only thing I wonder about with the Mariners is they like to, at least with listening to the guy. I'm going blank on the name. Darn it, the Mariners GM.
Jerry Dipoto.
Yes, Jerry DePoto. I was thinking Shapiro. I don't know. That's way. It kind of rhymes, but
Yeah.
but yeah, he's saying, people were asking, "Oh, what are you thinking for the deadline?" Well, the way we always like to look at trades, we like to improve today and down the road as well. Bell is gonna be a rental, so
I just mentioned this earlier. I can't believe I forgot it, but they just traded for Carlos Santana, so they filled that bucket.
that too,
Yeah.
and I'm more thinking because you do have Santana at first, so. I don't know. The way I saw that, I kind of was wondering. The one thing about Santana, his on base has actually been really good.
He's
The
always
average
been a
isn't
good
quite there,
baser.
so maybe they thought they could see something with Santana that they could fix. But
Yeah.
if it ends up not really being a needle moving kind of a move, then maybe they could end up still adding another bat. DH Toro has not really had a great year this year. Yeah, I mean, pretty subpar numbers. And so maybe you could do that. But again, you got guys on the IL. I mean, you got a lot of guys here. Obviously, France will come back eventually. Haniger he'll go back in the outfield. But I would imagine actually if they would want to maybe mix him in a lot at the DH spot, just so that keeping him off his feet as much as possible. So
this thought just came into my head. What about the Rays? Remember they traded for Nelson Cruz last year, and maybe he's this year's version of Nelson Cruz.
Yeah, absolutely. The Rays, to me, they're always a team you got to look out for. And I actually feel like I just read something. I don't know who said it. One of the baseball beat writers out there, one of the bigger ones, saying that the Rays, they kind of have their fingers on everything right now. So they're active out there. They got very lucky with Isaac Paredes, man. Maybe they don't think, maybe they think they didn't really get lucky. They just saw a good player, but he has been huge. But that could end up being a guy. Ji-Man Choi has always been more of a platoon kind of a guy, but he is having a pretty good year. To me, one of the more underrated players in the game this year. A great WRC plus. But the Rays, obviously, I mean, that's the thing with the Rays. You got Harold Ramirez, who's come onto the scene. He's contributed. So I wonder if they could end up going this route. But yeah, they have done the rental before. So I definitely, it's the Rays, they'll do something, and that could absolutely be an option. If you were to go best fit for Josh Bell right now, top of your head, who do you think?
One team that just popped into my head is the Cleveland Guardians. Who are they playing at first base? And oh, by the way, they're contenders. And oh, by the way, this is a cheap rental that they could afford. So
yeah, I like the Guardians a lot. That's one team. When I was putting together my video, I had them opting more for starting pitching, and but I mean, the starting pitching, if you're looking at the rotation, it's not looking too shabby. So, and I feel like the offense has not been great lately. And on the year, they ranked 28th in home runs, so and 23rd in OPS. So that could be an area they address. Reyes has struggled all year. Naylor, he's been clutch. He's actually been the most clutch player this year, I believe. But he was having some injury issues. But, I mean, overall, he's doing great when he's on the field. Franmil Reyes is a guy, I feel like he has been heating up a little bit. In that Yankee series, he had a couple of home runs. So I would not count out the Cleveland Guardians as an option. I'm trying to think another the Padres, like you mentioned.
The other thing about the Guardians, I do believe they will be active at the deadline because they have a roster crunch situation. They've got too many middle infield prospects, and they've got more coming that they have to add to the 40.
Yeah.
So they've got to start clearing out some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one more guy, you just mentioned him, and this is a guy who I think could absolutely be yet again an option on the trade market. Last one for tonight, Nelson Cruz. Not great numbers overall, because when you look at his numbers, he was horrible in the beginning of the year. If you take a look here, first month of the season, he was only hitting 155. And then May started to pick it up. And then June, still doing pretty solid for the most part. Batting average went down. Now July is starting to dip a little bit. So I'm not sure what's going on with Nelson Cruz. Do you feel like Cruz ends up being a guy that just ends up staying with the Nationals?
He's an old man. He's 42. Like, the question is there anything left in the tank? Maybe. I mean, that first month or so that you just pointed out, it looked like no, he's done. And he's a bit overpaid. So then, we have him at a minus 0.6 value. So he's close enough to even. But maybe the Nats would want to kick in a couple bucks and so they can get a minor prospect back. That's really in the trade value situation. That's what we're looking at here. And I can see somebody pulling the trigger just to have him on the bench, if they're thinking playoffs. So let's bring up Nelson Cruz as a pinch hitter in this playoff game, of course, you can see a moment like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like ultimately, I actually thought maybe he could be a good fit for the Mariners, go back home where he used to spend quite some time. But I feel like, because to me, he could have went anywhere, and he ended up going to the Nationals. So it's like he probably just, okay, I can play with Juan Soto, kind of just, not have to worry about a playoff race at this point in my career. Just kind of go out there, get some at bats, and
maybe somebody will want him for a bench guy, I think.
Yeah, very possible. We'll have to wait and see. But we do have a couple of super chats here. We had a few throughout the stream, so let me actually pull these up here. We had a big one from Conman752. Conman752 with a $20. Some other Orioles names I've seen pop up in rumors are Jordan Lyles, Dylan Tate, and even Keegan Aiken. Despite recent struggles, does Lopez still have decent value, and is it worth for the O's to trade any of these other guys? They've had a great bullpen, John. Do you think they should hang on to this bullpen? Because like the Pirates, I think people sleep on the Pirates because I think they could be really good. We talked about Brian Reynolds, probably wanted to, hang on to him. The Orioles are a team. Do they maybe just want to hang on to these guys? And I think they're going to be, they're going to get a guy in the offseason. I think because they were in the rumor mill for Correa, and they obviously did not get him, but I could see them being a team that ends up going after someone in the offseason. So do you think they could end up hanging on to these guys? Or what do you think?
I think they're going to get some good offers for Jorge Lopez. It's just, his struggles were just the last weekend or so, a couple games, but he's been lights out pretty much all season up until this time. We still have his value at, a decent 4.0, which is for a reliever, who's out of options, got a spotty track record. That's pretty good. So I think they'd probably want to sell high on that, as they did with that trade with the Marlins they made in the offseason. Right. And they've got plenty of arms coming. I would think they would keep they would hold on to Tate and Aiken because they have more control. But they'd also want to trade Lyles. We talked about Lyles a little bit last week. They overpaid for Lyles. His value is underwater. He's a back end starter. They're not going to get much for him. They might even have to pair him up with somebody to get rid of him, or maybe they just keep him and eat the negative value. But I do think they should look to trade Lopez at least, but they should keep Tate and Aiken. To your point, they have the best farm system in baseball right now. I mean, the number of guys they have in the top 100 lists and who are coming is ridiculous. They're really, and by the way, the GM Michael Elias, came from the Astros when Correa was there, and Correa can opt out of his deal at the end of each year with Minnesota. So you could still see Correa go to the Orioles next year.
I really think, because that was a really interesting story. I started to buy in to the fact that the Orioles could be a sneaky team. I said with Correa, that was a prediction of mine. He was going to go to a team that no one was expecting, because everyone was saying Yankees, Cubs, maybe even the Red Sox at one point. I didn't see that at all from the very beginning, but you were seeing a lot. The Cubs were the big one. They were the big name out there for Correa. But to me, I stood firm. I'm like, I feel like a lot of teams are going to be scared off with the back, and they don't want to give him a long commitment. So I feel like one of these teams is going to jump out of nowhere and just get him. And ended up being 2 a.m. And then the Minnesota Twins just end up I just couldn't believe that. I had never gone live that late ever. And the fact I remember I was just about to fall asleep. My phone dinged, and I just had a weird feeling about it before I even looked at it, because I'm like, why am I getting a ding from Twitter at 2 a.m? I just knew something happened, and there it was. So,
yeah,
but yeah, absolutely. You got so many good prospects here.
Yeah, they're coming. They're gonna. In fact, they're not that far out of a wild card spot this year.
Yeah.
But their contention window starts, next year for real.
Yeah.
These guys are different timelines, but there's a bunch of them coming, and so that's going to be really bright future.
Gunnar Henderson has
he's lights out. Yeah,
he just exploded this year. Like, he is number 5.
I know.
Like, they just updated this top 100, I believe. Was it today or yesterday?
Yes, and now Baseball America is doing their update any day now as well. And he's been jumping up there too. Yeah, so in any case, even after they graduated Adley Rutschman, they've still got a bunch of guys coming.
Yeah,
so they're going to be formidable. And so what typically happens is you build your core with all those sort of young guys that you've developed, and they have developed them well. And then you add on top of that core with free agents and such. So given that they have a window starting soon, they should keep Tate and Aiken at least. But I think they should trade Lopez and Salhayan.
Yeah, I think they should, if you can go after maybe some guys that you can possibly add, see if you can do a little bit of both, buy and sell. I got to do a video on that soon about which teams I think will buy, which teams I think will sell, but both. I think people forget that there are teams that could do both. I think the Marlins are a team that could end up doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one guy that is a name to look out for, I doubt he'll get moved, but you maybe could do something for Pablo Lopez if they want to take advantage, but because the way he's pitching, are the Marlins going to want to pay him in a couple of years? Could you do something for that? They've been looking for bats. Maybe that's something you could do.
Yeah, I think that would be foolish.
Yeah. It's but he's been a name that's out there, but I could see the Orioles definitely being like a buyer and a seller, sell some of your pieces, but see if you can add something along the way as well. So we had another super chat here. Let's take a look here. I think we had a couple more. Comment. Thank you for the $20 super chat. I really do appreciate that. Let's see. We had a couple.
Yeah, let's get through these, and then I got to put the kids to bed.
The one thing with StreamYard, I wish they did just like a super chat kind of an option.
Mm-hmm.
To where you can just like pull the super chats up really quick. Here we go. Schmidt boy, Ian Happ traded straight up for Andrew Painter.
Maybe. It's pretty close.
I feel like you wouldn't do a straight up, especially with prospects.
Yeah, you probably throw in really a minor. Philly could throw in another piece. We have Ian Happ in the 20s. I think Painter is up pretty close to that. So that's a pretty fair deal on paper. And sometimes, prospects go a little bit higher than you think they will because the team is anticipating more, more helium. So I could see that. Phillies have a bad farm outside of, Abel and Painter. There's not much else there. So there's part of me that says, I don't know if they want to give up one of those guys. But on the other hand, they're on the bubble and maybe time is now. So, then again, Harper's on the shelf and is this their year? There's another one of these teams that sort of, you don't know if they're buying or selling.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on one second. I think we had another one here. Actually, that might've been it. I think that might've been it. One quick last look. I don't think we had any other ones. I think we just had the two.
Okay.
We had Conman and we have Schmidt boy. We might have had one maybe in the very beginning. Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah, that was it. Well, all righty. Well, we'll call it there. We'll call it a night. That was great conversation tonight. I feel like we went over quite a few players, and we obviously couldn't talk about every single trade candidate last week, but I feel like we got through quite a couple this week. And I mean, I don't know, there's definitely more out there. But it has been surprises. Huh?
There will always be trades that surprise you at the deadline. You're like, what?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's even like players that you weren't expecting, but then like, you know, where they could end up going too. Like, you know, we obviously, when you're looking at leaderboards, you know, which teams need offense, which teams need pitching. And then you end up seeing like the White Sox last year had a great bullpen go after Kimbrel. You know, it's like people forget that teams that are already really good in something can still go add to it and make it even make it dominant, you know, ended up not working out. So proceed with caution anyway. Yeah, it's still a little quiet out there. I'm hoping by next week we'll have a good amount of rumors to really sink our teeth into. We only had a couple of rumors this week. So, but everyone, make sure you're back for next week. We'll be back next Wednesday at 8:00, and we'll talk about whatever's happening. But everyone, thank you for really coming out tonight. We had another good turnout for tonight. Go check out baseballtradevalues.com over the next week. Go have some fun with that. And go check out the Twitter page as well. Make sure you're following Baseball Trade Values on Twitter. Obviously a very good site. I'm going to be playing around with it over the next week because I got to make a video on trades that I want to see. So got to be using a lot of BTV over the next week. So, but John, thank you for doing this again with me this week. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Robbie.
All righty. Have a good night, John. And everyone, have yourself a good night. We'll talk to you next time.